people are trusting you with a big part of their life. Their health and ability to move and self-worth that's tied to all that is not a small thing. And they're paying you hard-earned money and investing a lot of time, like you said, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours a week in you, which people don't even spend that time with their significant other, their family members, other important people in their life, but they're going to spend that time with you. So like, we have to take this seriously.
So Daniel, I'm looking forward to this because it's the away leg for you. I went and came on your podcast, which we'll obviously speak about a lot over the course of this recording, and this is the return leg. And you had a couple of really interesting topics I think are really worth talking about. But before we go into sort of like the main topic of this episode, I want to talk a little bit about your story and how you got into the industry, because I think it's something that I resonated with, and I think it's something a lot of other people can resonate with. So tell me a bit about your athletic career and the subsequent injury that you had from that.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me, by the way. I'm happy to be on the return leg. We had a great chat last time, and it's good to be here and amongst all the other fantastic guests you've had and conversations that you've had. So it's nice to be a part of that as well. But to get to your question here, my athletic career, I think, is a generous term, but I played soccer mostly growing up, played a whole bunch of sports. I excelled in soccer, and it was the one that I spent the most time training at and got up to like a decently high level. I was on like provincial scouting teams and whatnot, but I was always injured from the age of like 11 or 12. I kept having crazy knee injuries. To say it quickly, my kneecap would basically dislocate and pop itself back in, called a patellar subluxation. And this just happened like 7 or 8 times in either knee over the course of, from when I was 11 till I was 18 or so. Now, with that, I was always in and out of physio clinics and different types of therapy and whatever to try and get back on the field always. While I was injured, my father was like the team manager of one of the teams, not the coach, but like the admin guy. And so we had like an obligation to go to practice. And so I would still go to training sessions, but I wasn't able to train. So I would literally just do push-ups and sit-ups and just like stuff on the side. Like it was my dad telling me to do some exercises. I'm like 12 years old, like do a bunch of push-ups, do a bunch of sit-ups. And I got to a point where I think I was doing 500 push-ups and 1,000 sit-ups every single day before bed, which sounds like crazy. And I definitely couldn't do that now, but so that was the start of like working out and starting to feel a little bit strong. But anyways, back to the rehab stuff, and I'll try and make this story a little bit shorter, but I started to get super interested in how the body works and why is my knee keep hurting? What are all these muscles? What's this anatomy chart that's in the clinic? What are these rehab exercises that they're giving me? How does this all work? And then that just kind of fed into, all right, well, I'll study these things in school. I'll become go to kinesiology for my undergrad degree, and then get into some sort of sports medicine. I didn't really know exactly what that was. But then the lens at which I approached exercise was always, how do we make the body move well? And how do we prevent it from breaking down? And then how do we just improve upon all of that to make the rest of our life improve? So that's a story in a nutshell.
So regards to your anatomy, like knowledge that you went and found out, did you ever find out why you were getting the issues that you were having with your knee? Because there could be a few things that I'm initially thinking of, but getting it from such a young age, was there a genetic component to this? What conclusion did you come to?
Yeah. So what I was told through MRIs and through the doctors and whatnot was that my patella is actually a little bit smaller than it should be. The patellofemoral groove is a little bit shallower than it should be. And then my patella also sits up a little bit higher than it should. All of that leads to greater susceptibility to dislocations and subluxations. And it was to the point where my family doctor, so I live in Canada and we have, public healthcare systems. So you can't just show up to a surgeon's office and pay. You have to go through the system. So I had to go to my family doctor and convince him that my knee, I had a big surgery. I had to convince him that, there's something wrong with my knee. I need to like look at a surgeon. I need to, I've been to physio so many times, like this keeps happening. This is not normal. It's painful. It's all this stuff. And he said, no, you're fine. And I had to like beg him. And when I finally got to a surgeon, it happened to be a surgeon who at the time was working for the Toronto Maple Leafs, which is our hockey team here. So like, a pretty knowledgeable guy, we'd say. And he, does his orthopedic testing on my knee. And he's like, wow, do you mind if I bring some students in to come look at your knee? They're here today, and we don't see knees this bad very often. So I'd love to like show them this. And I was like, oh, great. Like,
How old were you
that's
at this
awesome.
point?
This is when I was getting ready for the surgery. So I was 20, 19 or
Hmm.
20.
Was that quite an intimidating thing that you come in and you don't know properly what's going on, and this is it's probably a big it's a major thing in your life, having an injury that's affecting you so much, and then you're told, well, can I bring people in here to watch? Like, how did that feel?
Yeah, I wasn't intimidated because I didn't know what the problem was, but I knew that there's something wrong with my knees. And I know that, not to like, shit on doctors and therapists and stuff, but sometimes when you're young, things get dismissed where it's like, oh, you're young, you'll grow out of it. Oh, this pain, you're just 14, 15, like you'll grow out of it. And it's like, well, I've been dealing with this since I was 11. Now I'm 20. I still have the same issues. Like, I obviously didn't grow out of it. So I knew that there was more going on. And him saying that more just confirmed to me that my intuition and feelings about my own body were correct. So I wasn't scared, but the surgery was quite a big deal. I was non-weight bearing on my left leg for 13 weeks. So my quads, my whole thigh was like the size of my forearm by the time I was able to like put my foot on the ground, and basically had to relearn how to walk. And in that time, I was not moving. I could barely like get up to go to the bathroom by myself. There was a whole bunch of time where I couldn't even bend the leg. And being an athlete and someone who identified with exercise as a part of my life and all this stuff, not being able to move and having that quote unquote freedom taken away from me really impacted my life and gave me a huge wake up call to be like, I know that I'm going to come back from this because it's a surgery and all this stuff, but like, this can never happen again. I can't like get out of shape and get fat and have back pain just because I don't exercise and all this stuff, and get to a point where it's like, oh, I can't move because I'm in pain. Like, this is not okay. And I have to not ever let this happen to me, and hopefully not let this happen to as many other people as I can.
Was it a big knock to sort of your identity? Like, you grew up playing soccer, you got to a decent level, so that was a little bit of, I presume, and because I felt this way with rugby, that it was a big part of who you were. And then, as you said, being training and moving, and then also not having been able to be weight bearing for such a long time. Was that a big shift in sort of like your identity? You had to do a little bit of rethink of sort of like, okay, who I am, what do I want to do? There's more to me than a soccer player. There's more to me than how much I move.
Yeah, definitely. By the time I had the surgery, I had already stopped playing and sort of like given up on that, because I had gotten injured so many times that every single time it was at least 4 months off the field. And, everyone else keeps developing and you start to fall behind a little bit. And so I kind of realized before I actually was done playing that like, I was never going to be a professional player. Like, that was not really in the question, but I played with some guys who are professional players, play for the national team. And so I was close. I would have had an average college career, I would say, in soccer. Wouldn't have been anything special, but would have just been able to have fun and kind of go out on my own terms. The
Is the
last
college
game that I
system as big as it is in the States over there in
no,
terms of like,
no.
like college, obviously American football in particular, but it's almost like a professional sports, some of the college stuff there.
Yeah, in the US it is. Here it's absolutely not, and especially soccer. Like the school that I went to, we had the best men's soccer team and one of the best women's teams in the country, like by a lot while I was there. We won 2 national championships back to back. On the second national championship, and I had like a lot of good friends who were on the team. I was trying to like organize, and I wasn't like super involved at school, but you would expect stadium to be packed, the chance for a repeat national championship win at home and all this stuff. You'd expect stadium packed, crazy party, but like there was 20% of the stands were full, and that was it. And so yeah, it's not very big here. Definitely not like the States. It would have just been a fun time more than anything.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah.
So going back to what we were saying before about sort of like your identity with this, and almost like getting a good college career, maybe pushing into the international career. So what was that like when that sort of like you quit from that, and then also now you couldn't move?
Yeah, it was an interesting time because I sort of quit when I was starting to, be old enough to like drive and go out with my friends on my own. And so things, you hang out a little bit more, you eat a little bit more McDonald's. And one thing that I noticed was I actually started to gain weight for the first time ever in my life, because I wasn't playing soccer where I was always lean, but I never thought about being lean. I was just, on the field 6 or 7 days a week, and that was it. and I started to gain a little bit of weight. And that was one of the first signs that shocked me. Like, oh, this is different. This has never happened before. I'm not an athlete anymore. But I was like, if I start playing again, then this will all go away. And like, who cares? And I never started playing again after that. But I got more into the gym, and like the weight came off and all that stuff. But it wasn't very much, but it was enough to notice it for me. Now, my identity had to switch to like, okay, now I'm not a player, although I'm still around the game. I was coaching and like refereeing and still involved in the game and had friends who were still playing at a high level. So I never really disassociated from the game. One thing that I did realize was that I went to I started getting into martial arts as a fan. I started to fall in love with the UFC and MMA as a whole, and I was like, let me go try and do jujitsu. It seems like a cool thing to do. Let me try. And from the first day that I went, I realized that the thing that I missed was competition. I wasn't missing soccer. I missed the team and all that stuff, but I really missed competing. And I found that in jujitsu, and then I found that even further just against myself in the gym. And so that was the identity shift, was being a competitor. It wasn't really with being a soccer player. That kind of transitioned away for me, and I just found that competition aspect in other things.
Like when it comes to the injury, I think so many people, when they get things like this, they accept their limitations and they just go, cool, not going to go further into this. What did you think it was about you that refused to accept the limitations that you had around your knee? Like as a kid, you seem to be like always pressing doctors to find a solution. I know there's something not right. And then a lot of people would have game out going, well, it's my knee, so I can't do anything. But you changed and shifted your whole entire career path to find an answer. So what is it you think it was about you that allowed you to do that, as opposed to sort of like resting on your laurels a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to say it's just, my personality and perseverance, although that's kind of, cheesy and cliche to say, but it's not something that I ever really thought about. It never crossed my mind that, I'll never be able to do this stuff again. And there was one story that always stands out to me. And there was one day during the recovery of this surgery, quite early after it. And it was quite a particularly painful day. It was always painful, but I had a decently high tolerance for pain. And I, had to go to the bathroom. So I had to, lug myself over to the bathroom. And here I am, right? Former athlete, if you will. And, young guy, ego, all this stuff. And I'm dragging myself into the bathroom. And I was in so much pain, so uncomfortable, couldn't move my leg, all this stuff. And I had to like call out to my mom. I'm 20 years old, call out to my mom to like help me get dressed again, because I couldn't like put my pants on. I couldn't muster the strength to put my pants on by myself. And like, as embarrassing as that is, that was like a life-changing moment for me. And I don't even use that term lightly, but it was a life-changing moment for me, because that thing happened. And then I said, this can never, ever happen again. If I can't even do this right now, never mind playing soccer, lifting weights, doing other stuff. How am I going to go for a walk? How am I going to like, I don't have any kids, and I'm not in the near future, but like, how am I going to play with my kids? How am I going to do anything if I can't even do this stuff? And so it's like, I can't just accept limitations now, because it's not going to get any better. It's only going to regress. So I need to be able to do the most that I can for as long as I can, so that as things dwindle off, then I'll be able to be slightly ahead of the curve.
To skip a step before coming back, do you think like, as much as that was a really, really challenging time, as much as that was a really hard time, do you think looking back now that was a benefit in your life, whether it comes to hard times at work, or, we spoke off air about the stuff you're doing to sort of like push your podcast. Do you think you would have been as perseverant if you hadn't had these difficulties early on that formed the way you think and the way you are?
Yeah, probably not. You're probably right about that. I think about, this may be a very sort of entitled, privileged thing to say, but like, that is the hardest thing that I've ever gone through in my life. Thankfully, we've always had food on the table, and we've never had like hard times in my life. And so that is the hardest thing that I've gone through. And so if I didn't do that, if I didn't have that happen, maybe it would have been something else, right? Like everyone has the hardest thing that they've done, and obviously people have way harder things that they've gone through than what I did. But for me, it was very physical, and it was very visceral to me. And so I can always draw from that. The other side of that equation is, we talk about, regret, and would you change things? How would you wish things turned out differently? And of course, in a perfect world, I would have rather never had those knee pains and all that stuff. But I like where I am right now. I like who I am right now. And everything that has happened in my life up until this moment has led me here. So if if that occurrence didn't happen with my knee and all that stuff, like maybe I wouldn't be here on this podcast talking with you. So like, who knows? It's hard to say, right?
It's a butterfly effect as well, right?
Yeah.
That, if that thing didn't happen to you, where your life may have ended up may have been different, may not have been better. And you hit, I think, it's, people always say that, okay, there are people much worse off. There's always people dying in Africa, but stress is subjective, right? And you have no comprehension of what that's like, right? For every person like that, there's an interesting here. Like, have you ever been to Hong Kong?
No, never.
So on a Sunday in Hong Kong, right? You go outside and it's almost like you've added like millions of homeless people on the street every single day. And it's all the domestic helpers here that don't work on a Sunday and don't live with their people, their employers on a Sunday. And they go out and they're playing games and this. And so when I first came here, I was really jarred by it. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Why have they got no place to stay? Why isn't there shelter? What's going on? And then the longer you're here, I remember I was here on the first Christmas day, and they look like they're having more fun than anyone that I was hanging out with. And so you realize with these things, the stress is subjective. So there might be people in worse situations, but there are probably people in worse situations that are happier. We always use the example of like tribes always seem really happy, and they're very primitive. They don't have all the luxury we have. But I think like what floors you might be nothing to me, and vice versa. And what floors me might not be the same to you. So I think it's subjective. I think hardship is how you battle the subjective reaction to something, as opposed to what's actually happened to you. I very much believe that things don't affect us. It's how we react to things that affect us. Especially if you look at any stoicism, that's generally the way they sort of live their lives. And you hear like things. I listened to a podcast recently, really interesting, with Daniel Yores CEO episode with the Liver King, and I had to listen to his backstory. And he spoke about, like, he asked the question, like, would you take, because he got really badly bullied, and this is what I think had a lot to do with the way he is. Because would you take it back, but also would you wish it upon your kids? And he couldn't answer that question because he's like, well, obviously I wouldn't want them to do that, have that happen to them, but I think he's learned so much. One of the most important things in his life was having those difficulties. He's very much a firm believer that they have to have their own.
That's a super tricky question. And I think about that for myself, like, would I want this, knee surgery, whatever, all this stuff for my kids? And like, probably not. But like you said, we're all going to have to go through our own thing. And, our parents have told us so many lessons, don't do this, don't do that. And it's always, yeah, whatever. And then, you don't listen, and then you go do that thing. You're like, oh, fuck yeah, they were right. Like, but you got to learn some of this stuff on your own. And so, of course, you don't wish ill on anyone, and you hope that people learn from others' mistakes, but humans have continued to make the same mistakes over and over and over and over again, and we will continue to do so. But we all just got to like learn those things for ourselves. It's a funny thing, but that's a deep question.
Would you be apprehensive send your kids to play? I know soccer isn't a contact sport, but soccer or a more aggressive contact sport, knowing the injuries that you went through no fault of your own, would you be more cautious putting them in a dangerous environment? Let's say they wanted to do MMA, or would you not mind because you know the benefits that team sport or even sport in general helped you do?
Yeah, for non like contact sports, so like say like not MMA or any type of combat sport or football, I would not hesitate at all. Like, physical injuries are going to happen, knees, elbows, shoulders, whatever. And I feel like for the most part, those can be overcome. I did it there. And if they're my children, like, I would know how to help them the best and guide them the best. They wouldn't just be lost and, oh, I hurt my shoulder, so I can never play again. Like that wouldn't happen. The more contact sports, it would be trickier. I would not, I don't know how to say I would not be inclined to not let them play. I would just, be intelligent about it. And if they get into the trap of thinking that they're going to be a pro and wanting to do that as a career, but they just really don't have it, then I would start to pull them back, because there are different consequences when you're dealing with brain injuries, then you're dealing with like a knee or a shoulder. Those are totally different worlds, obviously.
Yeah.
But if they're happen to be phenomenal and amazing at it, and they really love it, and it's really what they want to do, then I mean, by all means, like, we've all got to find our own way in life, and if that's their thing, then that's their thing. So it's a tricky one though. And again, I'm not having children anytime soon, so maybe my answer will change when that happens. But who knows?
And watching it through your hands, it's
Yeah,
difficult to say it subjectively, but maybe not when you actually have a kid that you love. But
exactly.
I agree with that. And the brain injury thing is interesting because it's something that we still don't know the full scope of like CTE. Obviously
Yeah.
it only came up 2005 after the Chris Benoit incident was the first time they actually started really looking at that, and then all of a sudden all the NFL players, and it's still relatively recent.
Yeah.
It's less
The
than
thing
20
the
years
thing that
ago.
would worry me the most about I would actually be more worried about football than I would about MMA. And I think it's because of the culture. Because it's a team sport, there's a lot of like old school coaches still coaching. And that's fine, but there's no need for like 8-year-olds to be doing like the Oklahoma drills where they're just smashing heads together. Like that doesn't need to happen, but that's the old school way, and we've got to toughen them up and like do all this stuff. It's old coaches who want to just make you run for miles, and it's like that has nothing to do with the sport. That's not how we do this. Where I think that MMA is a little bit newer, so there's a little bit more new age involved. It would also be more or less an individual sport. So me knowing more about these things and being involved in strength and conditioning and knowing about training, I could have a little bit more of a say in that. I don't know anything about football, so I'm not going to step on the toes of the football coach who's coaching, 65 kids, but I could coach my own son or daughter, or at least guide them if I say like, hey, that coach is like just making you take kicks to the head to toughen up your forehead bone or something stupid like that. Like I can just easily easily stop that. So
It's
I,
often a
I
big off the
yeah.
field as well, right? Is there a big is there a big social component that's worrying in certain team sports in America like there is in the UK? Like I wholeheartedly think that the social side of rugby is one of the greatest things in the world. I think I learned, and rugby's a very unique sport in the sense of there's just this weird almost code of honor in terms of
Mm,
you respect people, you respect the referee, you respect each other. You can get to a punch up on a field and you can buy that guy a beer after the game, right? It's a very accessible culture. But there was this thing that sort of came out when it comes to university, that university rugby became very, very boisterous. And there was a lot of
mm.
bullying and a lot of initiations, and a lot of them are really worrying. And that's almost a thing. Sorry, rookie mistake with my Instagram all of a sudden going off like mental. But there was this almost that environment. I know what stopped me playing rugby other than shoulder injuries was that sort of approach where you're like, I don't want to be involved in these socials. Like stupid stuff, like parking a mile out from where I went to university, stripping people down naked and giving them either their shoes or their underpants and letting them walk. And you choose the shoes because
Right.
otherwise your feet will be cut to shreds walking on like stony beaches and stuff like that. Like, is there that sort of stuff, or is that very British sort of like? Because the way I get a vibe of American and Canada friendships is that there's bullying, but people don't tend to take the mick at their friends, whereas Brits tend to be brutal to their friends.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak from any personal experience. I had nothing but good times with the teams that I was a part of, and like nobody that I know personally. Yeah, there were some like initiation stuff, shave the heads, and that kind of stuff. But it was always fun and in good nature. There's a prominent like private high school in Toronto here that had a major incident a couple of years ago involving brooms and the football team, and you can use your imagination for that one. It was quite a big story, and not good. Now, those things of course exist, and I don't know all of the stories. It's not something that I would be worried about or hesitant about, because if it's going to happen, I hope that my child would be smart enough or intelligent enough to remove themselves from that situation or not get there in the first place somehow. Um, but I don't think it happens frequently enough to say like, okay, you shouldn't play sports. I think that would be not a good reason to avoid sports, because all of the camaraderie and the teamwork and all of the other lessons that come from sport, I think, outweigh the possibility of running into these horrible incidents that do happen. Of course, they're bad and they should never happen, but I don't think that they're that common here, anyways. And in my experience, certainly not.
I think even in the UK, it's a sort of, there's a line, and everyone's line is a little bit different. Like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
little bit of piss taken and boisterousness and banter, as the UK guys would say it, it's fine. And where I think that line is might be different. Where I think that line, that's where a lot of the problems come, and people
yeah.
just
Like
get
there's
carried
probably
away.
some guys on the team who would happily strip down naked and park the car 2 miles away and walk. You know what I mean? Like they would just do that because like it gets a laugh out of everybody, and they don't feel ashamed or offended or in any way about it. But there are some people who would be like totally turned off by that, and that would be a bad thing for them. And based on their home life or whatever else has happened, they're just personal character. So yeah, it's individual, and you kind of got to be careful with it. But as long as all that initiation stuff is in good fun and like no one's getting physically harmed for sure, then it's part of it too.
Having said that, though, I don't think anyone that wouldn't be ashamed in that situation, considering the fact that it's Wales and it's very cold.
Okay, that's
This is
different.
probably
Yeah,
why a
it'll be
lot of
like
people
this.
took the cut feet, you know,
Yeah,
in the underpants. But
it'll be the
like,
same as doing it here in the winter.
yeah,
Or
boy,
worse.
absolutely, I can imagine. So
Yeah.
going back and looking at your recovery, like, how did you begin this process of recovering from injury? How do you go from not being able to put load on your leg to becoming a coach? Because that's a huge gap. You didn't just get on your feet; you went and excelled.
Right. So luckily, I found an athletic therapist who was fantastic. Answered all the questions, actually taught me how to move, taught me how to squat. Shout out to Carla. She's the best athletic therapist if you're in if you're in Vaughan in Canada by chance. She changed the way that I think about movement, and the kind of she's the one who gave me this aha moment of like, okay, there are good people out there. There are answers. It's not just, oh, here's the little TENS machine, here's the ultrasound thing, and a pat on the back, and away you go. And we talked about movement, and she taught me about these things. And I was in university doing my kinesiology degree at the time. And so learning from her, that was the thing that changed everything for me to understand, okay, there is ways to move, or there are ways to move rather, and we can do this better. You can get back. This is not a life sentence. And then I said, okay, now that I understand this for myself and I've started to go through this process and start to heal myself with her guidance, and now I can start to do this for others. And there was this one like youth leadership camp thing that I went to shortly after I was like recovered from all the surgery stuff. And there was a guy there who I just happened to meet. And we were walking up a set of stairs, and he was telling me about he had some knee pain, and I don't remember exactly what it was that I told him, but we had a few questions back and forth about it, and I just told him something about the way he was moving. I kind of like watched him, and I was like, "Oh, try this, like try pushing off this way," and I don't even remember what it was that I said. And he's like, "Oh yeah, that feels a lot better," and I was like, "Oh wow, that's how this works, right? I can assess someone's movement just by looking at them, understanding the knowledge of what happened to me and what should be happening in like a normal gait and a normal body, and then make a one suggestion and it helped him not feel knee pain like that. That's something. And I was like, okay, now we can run with this, and how do we apply this to other parts of the body and other types of injuries, and then go from there.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's really important. Is that having that almost that role model, that good therapist that sort of
Yeah.
inspires you to make big actions. Because I imagine so many people out there get really bad advice, and I
Oh
think
yeah.
that's why a lot of people do give up, because they feel like they've tried everything and they've failed at everything. And it's just having that, as you said, that aha moment, that light bulb moment that sort of goes, okay, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
So, what are the biggest mistakes you see people make when they're trying to get mobile, pain free?
Not doing any actual work. That's the biggest thing. And it's this like it's the same with fitness clients where someone comes in and they hire you as their trainer, and they expect that because they show up, you do all the work. I come here, I do what you tell me, sort of, in the gym, and you do everything for me, and I don't really have to take a lot of personal responsibility for it. The same thing is with rehab, and maybe even greater, where you hurt your shoulder. Okay, yeah, the therapist is going to massage or use whatever techniques and whatever machines, but when you go home, you have to work on strengthening that joint, keeping that joint mobile and doing all those things. And that's the hard part. It's the boring part. It's not the sexy part. I have this one client right now who has all these shoulder injuries, and he comes in, he's like, let's shoulder press and bench press with the bar today. I'm like, you can't even move your shoulders. If we do that once, it's going to be complaining, and we're going to do it with like, 15 pounds. That's not you're a 30-year-old guy. That's not, you shouldn't be bench pressing 15 pounds. It's not, normal. You're obviously stronger than that, but your shoulders don't allow you. So we have to actually move properly first before we can do anything else. So I think the biggest mistake is actually just not doing the homework, and those physio exercises that seem boring and seem like they don't do much. Neglecting that is the biggest mistake. And the second mistake is probably from the therapist side, where they've seen this so much that they almost give up on the patient. And this is, again, painting with a broad brush. It can be likened to a trainer who's been in the gym for forever. And I'm sure you've met people like this, where you can tell that they just don't give a shit anymore. Their clients do the exact same workout. Their form is atrocious. They haven't changed weights or progressed in anything in forever. They come to the gym and basically just, shoot the shit and move around a little bit, which by all means is good. But the trainer is just like so jaded by clients not taking ownership and not doing better and not helping or not helping themselves, that they just also give up and say, all right, you want to do your lunges with your knee all wonky like that? Like, fine, as long as you keep paying me. So there's a lot of factors, but it always comes back to personal responsibility for the patient, for the client, for the trainer, for their clients. So
I agree with that. And I think it's interesting, though. I think for me, I think the coaching thing is a little different, because I personally, and maybe this is just me, because I have seen people like that, where I take a responsibility of how I am on the gym floor.
mm-hmm.
See, I could be totally jaded about the rest of the world. I could be totally jaded about how they follow their diet and chasing up on someone with the diet, but they come in and I have a quality of service to me and to the rest of the trainers in the gym to put the person to a safe and effective workout. When you look at doctors are like this, I think, especially in your part of the world where they also profit from this, but also like, and physios and like osteos and things like this, I think are the same thing. Is it that they've given up, and that's the reason why they're not looking to help people and give people homework and things like this? They're just coming in and adjusting them and getting out the door, or have they realised when if you've been with someone for with clients for 10 years, you can tell probably that person is not going to do the work, and it's sort of like that person that over medicates. Is it because they just don't care, or is it because they've realised, okay, I need to make a change in this person's life? I ideally like to do this, this, and this, but they're not going to do this, this, and this. So getting them a painkiller will at least get them out of pain. And this is the most effective thing I can do right now. Like adjusting somebody as a chiropractor, I get you out of pain. I know you ain't going to do your rehab. So I just need to do something that gets you one step in the right direction. And hopefully something happens that allows you to be motivated and get the light bulb moment if it's not coming from me like it did for you in that sense. But I do see physios and all the time where you come in and go, well, I got acupuncture this week, or I got on some sort of like reformer reverse hack squat thing and did some like weird yoga thing, and he told me to balance on one leg on a Swiss ball and do something like that. And I'm like, what are you doing? You need to get strong.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's so many factors, and I don't want to like offend any physios, chiros, athletic therapists, massage therapists. I'm obviously not speaking to everyone. There are plenty of good people out there. There are plenty of bad people out there in every single profession ever, right? Now, I do agree that there is some value to like all right, let's just get you out of pain. At least this is going to help. It's the same notion as like, well, you're not going to go to the gym and eat healthy, but you might go for a 10-minute walk, and at least there's that. It's the same kind of thing as that. So I mean, maybe it's just me being ambitious and like wanting to help so much. And it's like, if we all cared that much about everyone and we imparted that on our patients and on our clients and on our whatever profession that you're in, then maybe things would be better. But I don't know if that's too optimistic of a worldview or not. But like there are plenty of friends and people who I've seen who have a little injury. They go to the physio and they always tell me about it because they know that I'm the fitness guy in the friend group. And I look at it and I'm like, well, what did he do? It's like, oh, well, he, kind of pushed and rubbed and did this thing. And then he used some machine and like, he gave me these exercises. And I look at them and they're like, fine exercises. And it's like, okay, do 3 sets of 10 of these twice a week and, see me again in a month. And I'm like, but that's not, even if you did that, that's not going to help you. Do you understand anything but what happened? Did he give you any other advice? Is that really going to make that much of a difference? Even if you did this, it's almost like we should set the bar higher and let them fall lower instead of the do this little rehab exercise for 3 sets of 10 twice a week. Do this rehab exercise 1,000 times a day, every single day. And if they do it 20 times a day, then that's better, because now they're at least doing it every day. So, but this is again just the motivation, the coaching, and like that individual approach stuff there, where it's hard to paint with a broad brush. So
yes, and I think when you're looking at things like that, it's like there's a fine line between overwhelm. You might find that person, if you tell them to 1,000 times a day, they do none, but if you tell them to do it once a day, they might do it.
right.
And he's saying, it's like, you may be an optimistic worldview, but I'd rather have more people that have an optimistic worldview than a pessimistic worldview.
Yeah.
Absolute sure. And I think, unfortunately, I do think it is, in a way, because it's the old analogy of you've got to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you put it onto your children, and people need to be able to help themselves.
Yeah.
And I know there's some times when I was very much like this. I'm sounding like I'm a folk singer. But when I first started in the industry, I was very much like that. This optimistic worldview, I'm going to help every single person. I'm going to get through to them. And then I realized a few years in that people need to want to be helped. You've got to be able to meet halfway. And I knew how much energy I was draining trying to help someone that didn't want to change. That energy could be better served putting more into the person that really wants to change. Now, it doesn't mean I leave a bad service, but it means that, okay, what are you willing to do? And maybe this is the conversation that physios need more communication skills that maybe coaches have, where they can find out where the client is willing to do and like be able to explain the whys, because people are more likely to do something if they understand what's going on with my knee, as opposed to knee hurts, do leg extension. Well, I'm doing leg extension. I'm not going to do that. But I think over time, what I realized that I put more energy into the people that really want to change, and I'm there ready for when the person that doesn't. Because like that person drains me, that affects
Everyone. Yeah. There's always clients that are like energy suckers in a way, and then there's clients who are like energy uplifters, right? You feed off them. Like I would describe you as an extrovert, and correct me if that's incorrect. I feel the same about myself, and it's like
it changes. I don't believe in the term introvert extrovert, because I think it is so situation dependent.
Totally fair enough, and that's probably like a whole other hour-long conversation that we could dive into.
We'll do a round 3 for that.
Yeah. But there's people who you feed off energy, and there's people who just like who suck your energy dry. And sometimes like I had to fire one client ever, and it was just because she was draining my energy, and the reason that I had to fire her was because she was also sucking the energy of everybody else in the gym, the other clients who were in the gym at the time, the other trainers, and it was dampening everybody else's experience. And it was like, listen, I really, I want to help you. You need to be helped, and all these things, but not with this. And there was like it wasn't just like it happened one day and then she's gone. There was a long lead up of occurrences that led to this. But, you have to be able to give the most of yourself to your clients as well. It's the same reason that we've got to stay in shape and walk the walk. And we can't be, staying up late and waking up early for our clients and sleeping 4 hours a night, and then, eat McDonald's all day long and then go to the gym and get mad at our clients for eating McDonald's and staying up all night. Like that's not okay. We've got to do the things that we actually say, but it's so that we can be the most of ourselves, so that we can give the most of ourselves to the people who are paying us to help them. The other side of that, I think, is that just one more thing off this, Simon, is like I've had tons of clients come to me because they have some injury. I would say 50% of the people who I've ever started to work with have like some sort of injury. And one question I always ask is, well, why are you here? Why are you at the gym? Why aren't you in the physio clinic? And they can never really answer that. And so to me, they've either been somewhere and it didn't help them, or they tried something and it didn't work. And like, oh, maybe I just thought I'd try the gym. And so to me, it's like, well, that's a massive responsibility to me. This person is trusting me, not with their fitness and the fat loss, but like to help their shoulder feel better. And they thought that I and the gym was the best option for them. So I better damn be the best option for them if that's what they're coming here for. And so I take that very personally and very internally, or I internalize that a lot. And I that's how I have to operate myself, because there's so many options, other trainers, other therapists, other this, and they chose me by happenstance or by, direct choice. And so I have to take that as seriously as possible, and,
I think you have a big impact
have fun
there.
too.
I think you have a big impact there because they may see their physio or therapist once a month, but they'll see you 2-3 times a week. You think the impact you have, you sometimes see your clients more than they see their families, more than they see their friends, more than they see their partners. So you have the chance to build that relationship, to encourage them to do more outside the physio thing. And this may be me defending physios as well. They get 20 minutes to try and change someone, to change their life. And, well, actually, I've got 20 minutes just to get you out of pain. Whereas you might have 3 hours a week, but you can sort of go, look, this ain't going to work without the work on the other side. I wanted to come back a little bit to that practicing as what you preach thing, because I think there's a bit of nuance in there as well. And I don't know whether you agree, because for years I worked in a facility where it was everything. But you have to be, we used to do body fat checks on the gym floor. Like if you were over a certain amount, then you get told off. And
for the trainers or for the
clients? Yeah, it wouldn't be up to clients. Yeah, for the trainers. And it was, and I very much lived by this for such a long time. Like you have to absolutely, but I think there's middle ground here. There's nuance. Now, don't get me wrong. A massively out of shape PT who never has been in shape, like never been lean, and doesn't look like they've had any muscle on the gym floor. What are you doing? Get lean at least once in your life. Put on at least amount of muscle that you look like you go to the gym. You don't have to be the biggest guy in the room. Neither of us are the biggest guys in rooms, but we both look like we train.
Yeah.
But I think after that, I think sometimes it can become a bit intimidating. I remember a client, for both trainer and client. From a client perspective, I think I've had a client once that said, the time I started listening to you in your diet is when you told me that you'd had a pizza, because I just thought you were someone different. I thought you were this person who just loved chicken and broccoli and every workout was beast mode. I'm like, of course I'm not. And I think that being human is important. And I also think setting something that's realistic for trainers, because some trainers out there, and I work with a few of them and they're amazing, are bodybuilders, and their sole passion in life is that. I grew up with parents who are in pubs. That is not me. And I would much rather not all year round practice entirely what I preach and have an odd night where I stay up too long editing podcasts, because that's my priority at the moment in time, or a day where I have a bit of bad food and maybe a little bit of time where I'm not as lean, because I take ownership. And that's what I want to encourage my clients. I take ownership of my current circumstances. So when I diet, I take ownership. When I don't get myself get really sloppy, but I take ownership of that. And I think sometimes it's a hard, we trainers create this almost impossible image for the clients to sort of relate to. It's like, are you telling me that I've got to live like a monk for the next 60 years of my life? I'm like, no, I often say to my clients who struggle with social occasion drinking, when you finish your diet, I'll buy you your first beer.
Yeah.
Because I don't mind you drinking, but I just want you to either say, I don't want to diet anymore, Simon. Okay, cool. We'll just get strong. Go and have your beer. Or you go, okay, I'm in 6-8 weeks. Let's go all in. Because what I hate getting is that person that goes 1 foot in, 1 foot out of something. So they end up having this diet that ends up lasting 2 years because they're sort of taking 1 step forward, 2 steps back every single week.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we touched on this last time too, a little bit of like the aggressive diet approach. Like your diet shouldn't be sustainable, right? The sustainability word is like, that's how you live your life. If you're trying to get lean, like you shouldn't be eating in a deficit for 2 years. It shouldn't be sustainable to be in your deficit for forever, right? Be in the deficit and then get the fuck out and live your life, right? I would also argue, not even argue, but like counter your point kind of thing, where by you living like a normal person and staying up late every now and then to work on the podcast and going out for a unhealthy meal and having some beers, like that is practicing what you preach, because you're not the type of person who's like, you must live like a monk. You are not one of those kind of people. And I agree with you that is much more relatable to most clients, because they don't want to be a bodybuilder and they don't want to be 6% body fat, and they don't want to eat chicken and broccoli for every meal and walk around with Tupperware containers of food. They want to be able to live. And so having a trainer who looks like they're in shape but is not totally dedicated, or not totally obsessed with their totally obsessed with their body fat percentage levels, that is off-putting. And I've never been that way either, right? It's like, I look like I lift, I'm decently strong, I can perform every exercise that I would ever give to a client, efficiently and proficiently and with a decent, appreciable amount of strength. And I don't, do an exercise and it's like, okay, I really struggle with this one, but you go ahead and do it. Like this is the first time I'm doing this. You give it a try now, right?
Yeah.
It's the whole thing. So walking the walk to me and living as we preach or practicing as we preach includes that. Yeah, I had to stay up late last night because of this, that, and the other thing, but this is what I'm going to do to recover from that. This is how I'm going to change my training. This is why I did it. I'm not going to let it happen for 8 nights in a row, right? I had a bad meal last night, but it was, so and so's birthday, and then I'm eating healthy today, and I'm training, and that's walking the walk and practicing what we preach, not just being a monk, as you said.
I couldn't agree more with that. I couldn't agree more with that. And I think you end up with trainers that burn themselves out of the career much quicker than they need to. And maybe I was one of these to a degree. I'm just where you just live in is like I want to live my life a certain way, but I feel like I've got to live up to the role of a personal trainer more than I actually am a personal trainer. And when I sort of realized that, it's okay a little bit, and now, don't be wrong, I've been back in the UK for 6 weeks, just got back to Hong Kong. I probably am carrying a few extra holiday pounds than I need to, but that's fine. And understanding that over the course of the year, it will be cyclical and there will be times to let yourself go. How many clients do you know that finish a diet that are scared to put on a pound or two? And when they realize, like, no, this is okay, this is also expected and necessary at times, it would take that fear away. If your trainer always looks like they're 6% body fat, how can they say, no, it's okay to gain weight? They've never done it.
Exactly. The other side of that is if you went back home to the UK, you put on a few pounds, but like how much weight would you say that you put on, just to draw it up?
4 or 5 kilos, probably.
Okay. So it's 4 or 5 kilos, but it's not 15 or 20 kilos. And that's the difference. And it's 4 or 5 kilos that you've put on. And in several weeks, it'll be off and you're back onto routine. That's the thing that I think is more powerful than like, oh, I didn't put on any weight, or I put on a massive amount of weight. And now you're just going to, you went on vacation for a month, you put on 20 kilos. That would be pretty impressive if someone was able to do that. But I mean, you put on an absurd amount of weight and then you never lost it. That's the tough part. If you put on just a little bit and then you lose it, that's life and that's normal and that's relatable. And that's, I think, where more people can relate to.
I think segues onto the other topic you mentioned, about optimal versus practical. And this in particular, I think I think you brought this up because of the rise in exercise mechanics and everyone trying to make things as optimal and as fine-tuned as possible. I think before we go into this, like, what do you personally define as optimal in terms of training? Like, what do you think about the trend? What do you consider optimal? Like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, so as far as the topic, I think of it as what I see on social media and catching steam, and it's this hyper concentration on hypertrophy training only and specific exercises and specific setups. And as far as I can tell, most of this, and this is the ironic part, but as far as I can tell, most of this started from Coach Cass's N1 education stuff, which
I
the
got
ironic
a little bit before because RTS with Tom Purvis came to the UK, and then then Ben Pekulski, and then Kassem. So it's been around longer, but Kassem has certainly popularized it. Huge.
So popularize it. But then the ironic part of that is Kassem's whole course and branding is N1. N of one. Not this is the only way to do things for everyone, which is the thing that I don't know how this has been missed amongst all of this. He wouldn't even say that. He might say that, yeah, this setup for a lat pull down is probably the best way to do this, but also, N of one everything. If this setup is somehow unattainable for you in your gym, you don't have this equipment, or it hurts you, or you can't set up your training like this because you train in a busy gym, or your diet is not dialed in, then who gives a fuck about the angle on your lat pull down? None of that shit matters if not, you're doing nothing else right. And so that's the part that I can't figure out how that's been missed, other than like it's just caught steam on social media because it's things that are said often without nuance. Do this, not that. It's like if I said, eat carnivore, fruits will kill you. Like, that catches attention, or vice versa. And so it's this lack of nuanced messaging that just catches steam on social media. And so I understand how it's been spreading. I just don't understand how the people who are like going so hard at it and ignoring other stuff, I don't understand why.
Do you think there's the nuances there? You just don't see it because it's not what the algorithm pushes into your newsfeed.
That's totally possible. I try and ignore it because I it doesn't serve me, but yeah, maybe I only see like the loudest stuff. If there's someone who's making a more in-depth post about it, then that's different. I'm talking about, those 8 to 10 second clips of like, do this and never do that other thing ever again for any reason. Like that's
I
probably
think
not, it's probably not true.
I think I've seen it firsthand because I ran education for a gym there where the RTS thing came in big time from a few of the guys there, and the problem I find, I think the stuff is sound. Physics is relatively irrefutable. Bear in mind, this is our laws of physics. We thought the atom was the smallest thing. It does not mean that this will not change, but we're pretty concrete on levers, moment arms, forces, inertia, things like this. Now, the problem is a few people go and learn these very complicated topics and learn how to apply them to training. They'll come back, they will teach it, whether they teach it for a gym, like in my case, or whether they taught it for on social media, which is even bigger a thing. And then people hear sound bites or people learn a message and don't really know how to apply it. And the problem with any of these complex courses is that application is the problem. So one I often saw a lot was people talking about active range of motion. Now, very, 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 very important. Right? The amount of times I see people at best like stagnate people's growth because they go so far past their active range, let's say on a chest, because the bar's got to touch the chest. They don't actually stimulate any chest and people just grow big delts. At worst, damage shoulders, because this is the range I've got, but I'm pushing you further than you own because this external bar has to go somewhere. This handle has to achieve somewhere. But what I often saw was that people became so worried about hurting people, active range of motion became 1-inch pressing. And we had the problem we were trying to get away from in the first place with this full range of motion crowd, that people are doing 3-inch squats.
Yeah.
And we're like, this defeats the point. If your active range of motion is so poor on a press, let's say it is, you don't do a short range press, you do another exercise. If I can't get all the way down in a squat, I'm a great example. Big long femurs compared to my tib fib. My external rotation is there, right? And I've got this tested. This isn't just the fact that I've got tight pecs and tight rec fem. It's a little bit structural. I ain't going anywhere, whether that's bone spurs or genetics or whatever else. So my squat is a heel elevated safety bar squat, slightly wider stance. And my accessory work is hack squats, split squats, leg extensions, leg press. Stuff where I can get into a full knee extension. I get through the full range challenge. I don't start going, cool, I only do a third of a squat. And I think it's the interpretation of stuff like Kassem's work that is often bad, because people take a soundbite, don't understand the soundbite, and then go and apply the soundbite.
Yeah, see, that's exactly the problem with it. Is you nailed it. I like you, I nerd out on these things as well. I read it and I see it and it's like, oh wow, like that's super interesting. Maybe never thought of it like that. Maybe never learned it that way. And of course, biomechanics and science is irrefutable, and I would never argue that. My beef is with the people, like you said, that take the sound bites, don't understand the nuance or the full messaging or the full thing of what's going on, and just parrot words and phrases that don't really apply to many people, but sounds kind of cool and makes one sound smart. And the thing that I actually don't like about this is that it gets out to people who aren't coaches. Like if Kassem's making his stuff for coaches and stuff, like that's great, and people who understand it. But it's the person who takes that soundbite and pushes this out to regular people, and people are more concerned about the angle of their wrist than the 3 cheeseburgers that they had last night. And that's the part where I just think there's like a huge disconnect, and people are just missing the forest for the trees, or whatever that saying is, right? But there's people are getting into the nitty gritty about stuff, but they're not even paying attention to the big picture. And it's great that people are more interested in training and wanting to train intelligently, because I think there's a lot of bad training out there, the 3-inch squats, and like I'm happy that range of motion is a discussion. And people understand length and muscle and shortened position and these words, but knowing words and understanding concepts are 2 very different things. And that's where the trouble comes. But like overall, I'm happy people are training, and if that stuff gets more people in the gym, then by all means, like maybe we should just continue with that and go harder at it. I don't know. Maybe I should contribute to it too.
look at the coaches, I suppose. Though it's like I see two sides to this. Like, are they spouting bad information? Yes, and my natural inclination is to get annoyed by this. But also, there's a learning process here. You don't just learn that through your own training. Certain like mechanic stuff, you learn that by playing around with people
Yeah.
of different shapes, sizes, and structures. So I would argue when I had a magic instructor when I was doing card magic as a hobby for a while. One thing is like, don't put anything on social media until it's good, because it's obviously practice all you like, but don't post it publicly. And I
Right.
think if you want to experiment with your clients and they understand that it's an experiment and you're working around some things and you're trying to improve stuff, great. But maybe don't post it until you get an understanding of it. Maybe is the answer here. But I think we've got to allow people room to learn and understand. And sometimes the best way of doing that is to teach. And if you haven't got an audience to teach because you aren't an authority yet in the space, maybe a camera is the place where you can sort of take information and try and digest it into words that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, it's totally a fair point. I would even say that I don't even think that it's bad information that is being put out. I think there's very little people who are purposely putting out actual bad information or incorrect information. I think more often than not, it's incomplete. And that's the part that's troubling. You see it a lot with diet stuff. Eat this, not that. And it's like, well, why? Why is that? And same thing with these nutrition things. So or these training things. So I don't know that it's wrong. It's just incomplete. But if they do get some pushback or people asking them questions and they're insightful enough and take on that personal responsibility to someone questions why should I do it that way? Why this angle? And they're like, maybe I'm not sure. Maybe I should go figure that out. And then they do figure that out and then learn about it and then spread that information more and be like, oh, so and so Susie 1 2 3 4 asked me about this and I went and researched it and like this is why. So just helping you all out. That would be amazing. And that's a great learning process. It's just the beast of social media and how like weird messaging gets out and like and not to go on off on another tangent, but the whole Andrew Tate phenomenon is like stuff that he said was taken out of context and
Sound
ripped
bites.
in weird ways and sound bites, and it's like it paints the guy to be worse or better than he is depending on how you look at it and depending on the editing after it. And we don't get the full picture, and that's why I love podcasts so much, is because we get to actually go into detail on these things and explain the nuance. And if I say something that's incorrect or incomplete, you challenge me on it and I get the chance to correct myself or actually think about it and like, oh no, maybe what I just said actually was wrong. And then we can do that. But in a post that's 8 seconds long, we were talking about reels and content stuff before we recorded, but like in a post that's 8 seconds long and you're trying so hard just to grab the almighty algorithm's attention, there's no room for that. There's no room for the maybes and the what ifs and the if this, then that. It's just the hard hitting fact and quote unquote fact, and away you go with it.
Yeah, I'll bring it back to sort of the topic of training in a second, but I do think it's worth touching on things like the Andrew Tate thing and the way things are, because we're in a world now, I think, where I rarely now know someone that complains about somebody being offensive or saying something wrong that has actually spent time watching them. How many people get complained about comedies? And have you watched a whole comedy gig? No. I just saw a 1 minute
Yeah.
clip on YouTube. I'm like, you have no context. You have no nuance. And I also think we've lost this ability. We throw the baby out with the bathwater with people these days. Andrew Tate's a great example, right? Do I disagree with some of the stuff that Andrew Tate says? Absolutely. Do I disagree with the way he talks about women? Whether this is actually his view, by the way, or whether he's playing a character because he understands social media. But yes, but do I agree with some of the stuff he talks about business? Do I agree with some of the slightly more conspiracy ideology that he has? Sometimes. And I can separate
Yeah.
the things I don't like from things I do. I am I don't want to say wise enough, sounds arrogant, but I am able to think critically enough to look at somebody and go, there is good and bad in everybody, and not go, I need to cancel that person because this 10th of their personality I don't like. Well, there's 9/10 that could help so many people in the world. And I think
Yeah.
we throw things out. Bring that back to training. I think the evidence-based crowd does this as much, if not more, than the mechanics crowd. Because I think the evidence-based crowd, the problem is that people read studies? One, let's assume they can read studies, which is a big if, right? I learned that at university. I'm rusty at that now, so I don't assume that 16-year-old bicep curl Steve understands how to read studies. But let's assume that's the case. People that put themselves forward for training studies are people that like training. There's very few studies done on complete people that don't understand it and never been into a gym in their life. So we're now taking this subsection of people that are slightly more advanced trainees and saying this is the right thing for them. The one at the moment is my thing I'm trying to fight against is this whole concept of reps and reserve. Now, I'm not against reps and reserve. I do think science is very clear at the moment for hypertrophy. 0 to 5 reps and reserve is what you're aiming for. I talk about reps and reserve. And I do think what you want for most people is to be between 1 and 3 reps and reserve on most of their top sets. Irrefutable, not denying the science and not denying what Mike Isidore says. I think fantastic. But look at the people Mike Isidore trains. And they are people that know where 1 rep and reserve is. I'm dealing with a guy who's never stepped foot in the gym in his life that, comes in like hunchback, barely able to move. And I'm sitting in there, I'm like, how the fuck do you know what 1 rep and reserve is? If you don't know what no reps and reserve is, how on earth do you have an idea what 1 is? Go through a period of time learning nothing, learning to push out of your comfort zone. That will give you so much more than just your set and your pec development. That will give you the skills that we spoke about earlier on this podcast of perseverance and pushing through and getting out of your comfort zone. And at the same time, once you've done it a few times, when you learn where the limit is, you learn what 1 rep and reserve is. In the same way that if people go, oh, I'm not working that hard because I don't want to get burnt out. Cool. Have you ever been burnt out? No. Work harder. Find where the limit is. Find where the wheels fall off. And then you know how to back off 5%.
I 1,000,000% agree with that. Almost nobody understands reps in reserve. And I'm not even sure that I understand accurately my like 0 or 1 reps in reserve on every single exercise because I haven't taken every single exercise that I've done to true failure. There are some that I do and do from time to time. And I think I have a pretty good understanding on the main ones, but I can't even think of an example now, but I don't even know what would my true 1 rep reserve would be on certain exercises. So there's no way, not that I'm some grand something or other, but I do know what I'm talking about. It is my job. There's no way that most clients know that, and nor is it even relevant for them at all. Like you said, hunchback can barely move. Who gives a fuck about reps in reserve? Like, let's get that shoulder moving properly so he can be pain-free to play baseball with his kid on the weekend. Like, what does no reps in reserve have anything to do with that person's training? It's a silly thing. And to build off of that is the people that get obsessed with overtraining. You talked about burnt out. Oh, I do 2 HIIT classes a week, plus I strength train for 35 minutes and do 20 minutes on the treadmill. I don't want to get overtrained. Have you read too many social media posts, or have you ever trained really hard in your life? Like which one is it? Overtraining certainly exists, but it sounds like this big scary thing. But the amount that you would have to train and under recover to actually achieve that is quite a lot, and something that most people will never touch.
Do you think HRV has made this worse? Some people start looking at HRV and they don't understand that either, and they go, my HRV is low today, so I shouldn't train hard. I'm like, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, to an extent.
It's going to be rubbish today, so then of course it's going to be rubbish. If you never looked at that, it could be so much better.
I've fallen into that trap as well, but I just shake it off. Like I have an Oura ring, and so it tracks all that stuff. And I'll wake up and know scheduled for that day, and in my calendar, like I've got a big deadlift day or something, and I just offhand it because I don't even check the scores every day, but I just check it and be like, oh, my recovery actually was like not that good today. My sleep score wasn't good, but I feel fucking amazing, and I'm like fired up and I'm excited. It's like, oh well, whatever, let's just go, and I have a great day. So like the tools are not perfect, and sometimes you can overcome that with just being excited and like getting ready for it. Now, if it was like,
I don't care where your HRV is on your Oura Ring but I care where it's gone over the last 6 weeks.
Exactly. Now, if I do feel like crap and the score is low, then that's different. But if I'm feeling good and I look at a number on a screen and that makes me all of a sudden, today is not the day, then that there's something wrong there. There's a more things at play than just your HRV there. So yeah, it's probably contributed to for those who do use wearables and track that stuff a little bit too much and put too much value in it. But a lot of people might. I don't know. How many people do you know that really pay attention to those things?
More by the year,
Yeah.
as more as Whoop bands and Aura rings and things like this become more prevalent than ever before.
Here's another thing then. How many people of those people who start to use these things do something about that data?
This is interesting because do they do something about data? Most of them, I would say yes. However, I'd love to see the correlation of people that do something about their data only when it confirms what they actually want to do in the first place. So I will use my HRV data if it tells me that my coach shouldn't train that hard today, or maybe I should have a day off today. But if that encourages you, oh look, my HRV is really good, let's push it harder. They don't use the data in the same way. If it means they have to do extra work, okay, let's go and do some cardio, let's go and work on some recovery, let's go to bed half an hour earlier, let's meditate. Those things are less done.
Yeah.
So it people would do stuff when it fits their confirmation bias of what they want to do anyway. It gives them an excuse. And what I think a lot of what our job is for coaches is, especially with a lot of general population clients, is how do we minimize excuses? So maybe sometimes tracking this data less is a good thing, because if it's out of sight, it's out of mind.
Yeah. And it's also taking the whole picture into consideration. If the data says today shouldn't be a training day, but tomorrow, you've got a big day at work and you got your kids' soccer practice after work, and then something or other, and then the next day the same thing, and the next day the same thing. It's like, well, if I don't train today, then I'm not going to train for the next 5 days. Maybe I should still go in today and maybe just take a couple pounds off the bar and do a little bit less, and let me just feel it out. But the app doesn't have enough nuance to tell you that. It's not a human being. It can't do all of that stuff for you. I mean, I guess technically it probably could at some point, and maybe it maybe will in the near future. But you have to just take into consideration the context of your own life and what's actually going on as well. And that's the tricky part. And that's where coaches come in to say, okay, how can we actually navigate this, and how do we actually use this other than just train your ass off or sit on the couch instead? There has to be something in between that.
I think that's where the conversation, when we're looking at optimal, and I'm as guilty of this as everything else, right? As I said, I worked in a place where the marketing was optimal. Our goal, we have the equipment, we have the gym facilities, we have the marketing that gets the clients that come in that are here for a ridiculous transformation. So we have to make this process as optimal as possible, and we're pushing you harder. You come out to the real world and you find that not everybody wants that. This is a very driven, targeted type of client. And then you have something like a lockdown, which shook a lot of trainers. Because I was spoiled. I was entitled with this incredible gym. And I was like, all right, optimal isn't actually practical for most people. Whether that is, I don't have the equipment, but also just mentally. You walk into a gym, you see the person in shape, right? Let's say you find that, that person, you walk in the gym, they're in great shape, and you know that you have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah.
If I asked you now, if you had 3 or 4 of those people in different gyms, what do they all have in common? If they had one thing in common, what is it?
Consistency. They keep showing up.
Consistently, I would say they train hard. So
yeah, that would be number 2 for me.
If you're looking at optimal, we can't do this without mentality. So I can have the perfect lat pull down. I can do this reverse banded Smith machine press. I could have yoga blocks and chest pads. We don't go far beyond the active range. We can do cable lateral raises. And these are all things I utilize. But if someone comes in and they look at that program, they go, I don't know how to set this up. And I check myself a lot when I write programs. Sometimes I write programs how I think is the best. And then I go, actually, how does someone read this the other end? And I have to scale back.
Yep.
But, if that person's not going to train hard with those things, then is it even optimal? Exactly. And sometimes that's making it less optimal on paper. And also sometimes it's also addressing misconceptions. One of the biggest misconceptions I deal with about exercise mechanics stuff when I talk about drop-offs is, well, I don't want to make it easier. No. Exercise mechanics done right makes it consistently harder.
Yeah.
Because now there isn't a point where it gets easy. But people understand that, and that mentally can affect someone's ability to go in and work.
Yeah. Putting the work in still offsets. Like you said, there's people in every gym, every public gym. You look at that person, they do the craziest shit. If you actually looked at their workout, they have no plan, but they're in there like working their ass off every day, and they've been there for 10 years, and they look pretty good, and they're happy, and they're enjoying themselves. And you think about, oh, this TikTok that I saw, it says like you shouldn't have big lats if you use, whatever thing this guy's using, but you look at the guy and he's a monster. Well, how does that happen? Right? There are other factors at play here. If you just train hard enough and for long enough, except for being at the, elite level of bodybuilding, you can probably get around most of the optimal biomechanics and training stuff. And I hate to admit this. It pains me to admit this, but it's true. There are people who work out like animals, and they have success because they train hard and they do it consistently.
There's a lot of this. I think the importance of mechanics. If you're a coach and you've got a client in person, and you can manipulate stuff to make this more effective, like I can get more from less exercises by manipulating through these things. Fantastic. Also, to get out of pain. We all knew people. I am one of these people. I know about 300 coaches that are one of these people that go, when I don't need to stop doing straight bar bicep curls because, maybe I can't completely supinate, but I don't get any elbow pain. And then you hit 30 and then all the elbow pain starts, right? because you've been doing that for years and you've been wearing and tearing the joints and pulling it into positions that you don't own. And so maybe if I switch to an easy bar or even better dumbbells earlier, less pain, less things like this. That's where it becomes relevant. But I think we get locked into things like, okay, neutral grip, elbows tight is lat. Pronated grip, wider is not lat. Less lat.
Yeah. Yes.
That still works. You're doing a pull down.
Exactly.
Do you feel the squeeze in everything? Do you feel the squeeze in your press? No. Okay. But your chest is going to be working, right? Because you are doing adduction of the arm. Is it perfect? No. Is it happening? Yes. And I think people understanding this, like rather than taking these blanket sound bites again, it's like a leg extension and a hack squat. I'm going to say hack squat rather than a back squat because you can't really take a back squat to failure. Will both train. You can both train to failure. Both will feel very, very, very different.
Exactly.
Because of shortened length and, where the load is, everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Things always change. They feel different. They're not the same. And I am losing my train of thought of what you were just building off of there. There was a really good comment I was going to make, but it's escaping me at the moment.
Yeah.
What was it?
So we're talking about I was talking about sort of like mentality that if you're moving a certain muscle, it's going to be working, whether you feel it or not, and how different exercises are going to
Right.
create
Oh, this is what I was going to say. It was about the messaging of when you said it's less lat. It's not lats. It's less lat. But when you post that on social media, it doesn't get views because it creates too much nuance, and it begs the what if, the maybe. These things are not absolute statements, and then they don't work on social media, and then they don't get out there. And that's how I think that this stuff happens. Because if you really ask that person and press that person, if you had a conversation with them, they would probably tell you, yeah, it's not really no lats. It's, it's just like a little bit less lats, but whatever. But for the post, the 8-second reel that I made, if I say not lats, then that blows up and then it gets out there. And so it's like this self-fulfilling thing. We post what works instead of post what we want to post. And, that just cycles down, and you can get lost in that trap very, very poorly. I've been lucky enough to, I think, not have fallen into that trap. I know that you haven't either, but there are many people who do. And there's a lot of people who come out and admit it after and be like, look, I was posting stuff that was getting attention, but I didn't agree with it, or it wasn't totally true. It's not incorrect information. It's just incomplete information. And that's how the messaging gets all messed up.
But I think, as we mentioned social media a lot, I think that's a big thing, right? This is the reason why people shouldn't, from a consumer side, people shouldn't look at getting their education from social media. Not anymore. Yeah. You might get little tips and gems, but if you want to understand something truly, hire somebody. Because you will not get the nuance in social media. You will get bits. And you will get what people, even the people that know their market the most, is them guessing what they want. They can't tell you exactly what you want or what you need. And that's a very different thing.
Right.
And I think that's where the importance of actually And something I'm learning is about social media is my outreach is more important than my content. And that's not something that's come naturally to me. It's like messaging people and just
Yeah.
starting being social on social media, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. What a
And this
concept.
is where I can bring nuanced stuff and actually talk about people's actual problems as opposed to them just going and doing a slightly better lap pull down, which never solves
Yeah.
anyone's problems.
Yeah. It doesn't take into context everything. Like a lot of people are looking for a workout program. You know, I have friends message me or people who I know, friends of friends and stuff. Hey, can you write me a program? And it's like, first of all, yes, I can. But second, that's not what you need. You don't know how to move your shoulder, rotate your hip, do all these things. So if I just write you a program, you can just go Google one. Like it doesn't, it's not any gonna be any different. I can write you exercises, but if you don't know how to use your body, I can write the most perfect exercises ever. It's not going to help you. That's where like hiring someone up front really plays a huge role in person if possible. And you know, there are different business implications that we kind of touched on earlier before with that, but it's like having someone guide you through those movements. And back to my whole thing of like move well first and then worry about loading up strength and doing all the other stuff. But if you don't move well first, none of the other stuff really matters because you're going to run into injury issues and run into other problems that are created by the thing that you're doing in an effort to solve it. And it's not your fault. This is just what's going to happen. It's ignorance because you're just not educated on this stuff. Because how would you be educated on this stuff? The same way I'm not educated in accounting or law, and like it's probably stuff that I do in my business that's like, you know, if an accountant looked at it, it'd be like, oh my god, like what's wrong with you? Why would you do this way? But I don't know. I just don't know any better.
Yeah.
So people don't know any better in the gym because they haven't been educated in that. And why would you, right?
And then going back to psyche, right? I could write the most perfect optimal plan for you, but if you hate it,
Yeah.
you're not gonna stick at it. I went to a 3-hour mentorship with a guy called Tom Hibbett here in the UK. It's a phenomenal strength coach and was the world's under 90 strongest man for a period of time, like a log press into this. And I went and speak to him about hypertrophy. And it's like, well, I'm more of a strength guy. And he was like, all these systems for building putting muscle on somebody. You're just like, when I'm doing strength, I look at numbers, I look at load, I look at percentage, I look at all these things to peak somebody. Hypertrophy, what are they going to work harder in? Like, it's not about
Yeah.
optimal or practical. It's like, do you prefer 6, 12, 25 or German volume training? Or do you prefer 2 sets, high intensity bodybuilding? Do you prefer like, and I've seen that firsthand. Even with like coaches, I've seen it where they want the most optimal thing in the world. And I train a coach and I'll give them a plan and maybe they enjoyed something, but then they stop enjoying it as much because they've done it for a little while. And now it's another conversation of the day of how long a program should last, and we shouldn't program hop. But sometimes changing a program just for the sake of, okay, this person's getting a bit bored, let's put in something different that's going to allow them to train harder, is a good enough reason to change. You don't need to have it like we need to, okay, there has to be these specific deload strategies, and we've got to look at the specific overtraining symptoms that they're having, or we've got to have to try and sound a bit like Cassim, you got to have your mitochondrial transduction phase into neurotranstimulus forcing phase. They've all got to be 2-week phases. And I love Cass, by the way, like I do.
Yeah.
But like, it's what people need to understand is this stuff is for coaches, and coaches that are really trying to find the minutia, as opposed to necessarily is for this clients. Like, everyone wants to do 2-week phases. Some people can stay on the same phase for 20 weeks. Yeah. And I think we're in, sometimes people go into information trying to find out what's perfect rather than actually thinking how you find out what's perfect is by speaking to your client.
Yeah. One of the things that comes up, and I'm sure this comes up for you with online clients, is like, this is way easier to do with in-person clients because you're there with them and you control the whole flow of everything. An online client, they're at a gym that you've never been to. You have them set up in an A1, A2, B1, B2, whatever their ordering of exercises. Well, A1 and A2 are on opposite corners of the gym. That's not going to work. And that has nothing to do with biomechanics, nothing to do with perfect programming, all that stuff. It's just like, well, if I leave that machine and I have to walk all the way across the gym, well, that's already like way too long of a rest. Plus, then I've lost that other machine. I got to fight with the guy to get it back. And like that's coaching, is understanding. Explain to me the layout of your gym. Where are the machines relative to one another? And if we need to pair up supersets or trisets or whatever it is, then let's get those close together, or have it be a dumbbell that you can bring, whatever it is. It doesn't, the biomechanics matter less when you can't even get the exercises in. It's the same as programming a program for someone 6 days a week, but they can only make it to the gym 3 days a week. What's the point of those other 3 days? It doesn't matter if it's the perfectly written program if they're not going to do it.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think that's super important. Finding something that works for people. You mentioned that about the layout of the gym, and this is what I think. We've had this push now where people think exercise mechanics is more important to learn than anatomy. And I disagree. I think there's two things I think are really important for coaches to learn: psychology and anatomy. Why do I say those things more than like nutrition and mechanics and all those things? If you learn psychology and how to communicate with people, dieting becomes easier. You can convince people to and find reasons and work with people to make any diet work, as long as you know calorie balance. Anatomy, if you understand your anatomy, you can make any gym and any program work. You can lose. The gyms could close because of another pandemic, and we can find adaptable ways. What happens when my perfect cable lateral raise can't work? Well, if you know your anatomy, you know that the problem with the dumbbell lateral raise is it gets really, really hard at the top when the weight is the heaviest, and there is nothing at the bottom. This first third is pointless. Okay, well, how about I take a set of 7s and I go to failure on a dumbbell lateral raise, and then I grab a set of 15s and I go partial range for the other half. And now I've challenged a full range in the same way that Cade were doing, and I've taken something in their gym that they can grab, they can go to any part of their gym and do. Is it as perfect? No. Is it practical? Yes. Does the outcome the same? Pretty much.
I'm with you on the anatomy thing. I think that I see this with a lot of newer coaches who I work with or see in gyms, and they treat exercise almost, and I was certainly victim to this like early on as well, because it's just, I actually don't know the reason for it, but it's just how things work, or it seems to be, that we start to memorize a Rolodex of exercises. Oh, you want to do a chest exercise? I know 4 chest exercises. Has nothing to do with how the pec works, how the shoulder works, how that stuff works. And so you're just rattling off exercises, and you've remembered that, like, okay, we can do a flat dumbbell chest press, and like, these are the 4 cues that you're supposed to know because that's what the textbook says. It has no understanding of actual anatomy. When you understand anatomy, you can create exercises. They're not even called exercises, but different setups for things to hit the muscle in the way that you want and make it work the way that it should be, that maybe is pain-free for the client, pain-free for yourself, more comfortable, more efficient, with less than ideal equipment, et cetera, rather than just memorizing like a Rolodex of exercises. Because what happens when, all 4 exercises that for chest are unavailable? Then what?
Or even
then you just don't train chest?
Or even if you look at, like, if someone looked at my flat bench press, goes, okay, why is Simon not growing his chest? And they go, right. I've given him bench press. And you look at my bench press, and you could first off, it looks more like a decline press because of the angle of my sternum. And I haven't got a particularly thick rib cage. So maybe it's not the best exercise. So maybe a slightly higher incline dumbbell press, like a 40-degree dumbbell press, probably close to a flat press. Okay, so I probably need to go up to an 80-degree dumbbell press to hit incline, upper chest. Also, my overhead shoulder range is poor. So I go, okay, standing military presses. It's in my shoulder Rolodex. I don't have that range. Not a good exercise. What else are you doing?
Exactly.
And when you know that, you can start to personalize. Like, you take that Rolodex and you go, okay, where do I place which one of these 4 chest exercises is good for this person's structure? And I think you become a much more personal trainer if you want to use like the N of 1. And this is obviously Cassim can do this very, very well when you start to know that sort of stuff. But again, I know in a way we're sort of contradicting ourselves here of people not applying it well, but like, spend time learning this stuff if you're a coach. It might sound boring. It may feel like it's not going in, but it's just practice. And I say to new coaches all the time when it comes to learning anatomy, study, like deep anatomy, 10 minutes. Like, go through an anatomy app, write down origin, insertion, action, rub it out. Origin, insertion, action, like everything for the shoulder. Then take 10 minutes, go and watch your favorite strength coach talk about that. Jordan Shallow, training lats. Cool, watch for 10 minutes. Then, last 10 minutes for the 30-minute study, go on the gym floor, do some lat exercises. Play around, learn how it feels.
Exactly.
Like, actually apply like physical experience to what you've learned, and you'll learn it much, much quicker.
Yeah. One thing I think that changed the way that I think about it was I started thinking about exercises in or muscles as movements. And so it's like there's, what, 4 to 6 or whatever, you got your upper body pushing, upper body pulling, lower body pushing, leg extension, whatever. And it's like, okay, now we fit exercises to match those movements rather than thinking about just names of exercises, right? And I think, yeah, you're right. You've got to just know the anatomy. That way you can set things up. I don't think that we're really contradicting ourselves though, because I think we'd both agree that the biomechanics and all of the nitty gritty details are important to know for coaches who understand the nuance and how to apply them, as you've alluded to multiple times, is the application of these things is what matters.
Hmm.
It gets lost when the messaging gets to someone who doesn't understand and not a coach, just a person, your regular gym goer who is not understanding all the nuance and doesn't know how to apply that or use that or even make any sense of it. That's where it gets a little wishy-washy, but coaches should absolutely understand these things and know it, but know how to actually know it. Don't just know the words to be able to parrot it. That's the problem.
I think to close off that as well, and going back to the point of practicing what you preach, it's not just about how you look and how you train. Are you investing in your own resources? I
Yeah.
spent a lot of money each year on investing, whether it's learning about my business or I'm doing a Integra, which is a phenomenal company in the UK. I'm doing their exercise mechanics study group every Tuesday from October for the next year. And that is me looking to upskill and learn more about what I do, more about movement, understand it better so I can give a better service to my clients. I am not relying, as you said before, on Instagram.
Yeah.
So whether you're somebody who wants a coach to learn this stuff for you, or whether you're a coach who, doesn't understand why he's not getting the client results he wants, it's the same thing. If you want to expect your clients to pay for you and you're sitting there going, why am I not getting any sales? Do you invest in yourself? If you don't see the value in coaching, whether it's for your own physique or whether it's for your own education, how on earth are you going to inspire your clients to see value in coaching?
Yeah, totally agree. We have to take ourselves seriously, take some real ownership. People are trusting you with a big part of their life, their health and ability to move and self-worth that's tied to all that is not a small thing. And they're paying you hard-earned money and investing a lot of time, like you said, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours a week in you, which people don't even spend that time with their significant other, their family members, other important people in their life, but they're going to spend that time with you. So like we have to take this seriously. And if we want to be successful in what we do and we all enter this to help people and all that stuff, then they can't just be something you sort of do. And yeah, I know bench press and I know squats and I've heard deadlifts and these things. And yeah, you should just do those. And yeah, kind of work hard. And if you don't take that real seriously, no one else will take it seriously. And then the whole thing is just kind of a mess. So it's
Yeah.
it's tough.
I totally agree there. And in order for me to be a professional personal trainer, I need to make sure I'm fed, caffeinated, and turn up to my clients on time. I
Yes.
think that was a good sentence to close the show. So for people who want to learn more about you, what they do, whether it's they're in Canada or they want to learn more about the podcast, where can people find you?
Yeah. So on Instagram and Twitter, at Daniel Yores, just my name, and the podcast cleverly named the Daniel Yores Podcast, and you can find everything through there. My website, just my name. I certainly coach people in person if you're here in Vaughan in Canada, just outside of Toronto, or online as well. And always looking to have great conversations with the podcast. Simon was on a podcast. I don't remember what the episode was, but it was a couple months back. But I'm sure we'll do this again on either yours or mine at some point in the future. But yeah, those are the best places.
You've got to commit to the podcast long term when you call it your own name.
Yeah. Well, the reason I called
I
it
don't
my own
want to
name was
hire
not
anybody,
to.
but I could.
Yeah. Yeah. So like similar to you as how you said your show is becoming more of a variety show. I love fitness and health, and it's what I talk about and what I think about, most of the day and all that stuff. But I don't want to silo myself into that for forever. So I didn't want to call it, the Daniel Yores Fitness Podcast or some other play on words that only means fitness. It's like, yeah, we're going to talk about fitness and health, and that's like the center of everything. And I really do live my life in that way. And this is like the backbone of everything. But there's a whole bunch of other cool stuff to talk about as well. So let's just
100%.
open it up by calling it my name, and then it's whatever it becomes over time.
Couldn't agree more. I want to talk about business and stoicism and pro wrestling and movies and
Conspiracy
theories. Yeah, we went to the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
But yeah, like all that stuff. It's just fun. So yeah, mate, thank you for coming on. Really, really enjoyed this episode today, mate. And yeah, speak to you soon.
Yeah, man.
Guys, thank you very much for watching the podcast. If you're like me and like to binge watch podcast episodes, click here for our most recent episode. And if you enjoy the show and want to be updated when new videos come live, click here to subscribe to the channel.